Right now, many countries, especially in Europe, is discussing to ease or restriction or to introduce more relaxed lockdown. And right now, Nad Bunnag is joining us. So Nad, what are the countries which are deciding to perhaps relax or cancel lockdown?
So today we'll be looking at the countries that have decided to ease some of their restrictions. So let's start with Spain, which has one of the most toughest measures in Europe. So they have decided to ease some of their restrictions as the number of infections have been decreasing. So you can see like a downward trend for a couple of days now. So one of the measures that they have decided to use is that some of the factory workers as well as construction workers can now go back to work. However, some of the shops or services still have to remain closed. Besides all the workers that can go back to work, some of the office staff can still work from home. But so far, the lockdown is extended until the 3rd of May. And the good news for families who have kids, from next Monday, which is April the 27th, children can now go outside with their parents. So that's good news for families right here.
And what about other measures? Do they still have to carry on like social distancing in Spain? And what's the shift of workplace? Have they got more details?
With the details, I'm not quite sure about that one, but with the restrictions that are put in place, whether you're allowing workers to go back to work or allowing children to go outside now, I'm pretty sure that social distancing still needs to be in place because the lockdown will be set to end around the beginning of May, but because of the situation, I think the social distancing still needs to be in place, whether it's in Spain or in other countries in Europe.
I'm sure that authorities in these countries are mindful of the possibility of a recurrence of the infections. That's why they still maintain some level of alert, especially maintaining some of the restrictions, especially those that deal with social distancing for another a long while. Of course, it looks like they are easing up, but they are not. All right, the shutdown may not be there any longer, but the social distancing guidelines are still very much in place.
But to ease or not to ease the restrictions, it's definitely a challenge for every single government because whether to ease or not to ease, it has pros and cons behind every single decision. So what every single government has to think about is that if they ease the lockdown or the restrictions, there might be a chance of resurgence of the number of infections or the death toll. So I'm pretty sure that every single country is doing their best to save lives at the same time as well as to revive the economy. So there's a tough decision going on here.
Definitely. I'm sure that Thai medical authorities are watching these countries very carefully because the Thai government is now under a lot of pressure to ease or to lift some of the restrictions. So lessons learned from this country certainly will provide the Thai government with some guidelines as how to respond to the pressure. And of course, as we see the number of new infection cases continue to go down, the pressure for these measures to be eased or relaxed will continue to rise.
And Nad, what are other countries which is considering to ease the lockdown in Europe?
Besides Spain, there's also Italy who has planned to ease some of their restrictions. There are some regions that have been less affected by COVID-19 that have already eased their restrictions. For example, they have opened bookshops and small shops in some of the regions that are not so hard hit by COVID-19. And some of the workers that cannot work from home are allowed to go back to work now, such as forestry workers and IT manufacturers that can go back to work now. Besides Italy, there's another interesting measure by Denmark. Denmark has decided to reopen daycare centers and primary schools, or even beauty salons, hairdressers are now allowed to reopen. However, restaurants and cafes that are at risk of having large gatherings are still remain closed. And as well as Germany, they also reopened some of their small shops and bookshops, but the gyms, restaurants, and bars are still remain closed. And the government also advised that the people should wear masks all the time to protect themselves by the virus as well. And other countries, we haven't heard much about France or the UK because the lockdown has been extended till for the UK is the 7th of May, France is the 11th of May, and if it's not in Europe, New Zealand has announced that the lockdown extension will be extended till next Monday, which is the 27th of April. So we'll see what happens from now on. We will then find out whether the government is doing the right decision.
You mentioned UK, and there was a media report today quoting the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, as saying that he had big concern that relaxing lockdown too soon could lead to a second outbreak of the coronavirus. So that's one reason why UK is reluctant to ease or to lift the lockdown, because I mean there are lessons to be learned from some other countries where lockdown or the stringent measures are eased or lifted too quickly, and then there was a recurrence of the virus within very short period of time.
This is so true, and this really applies to Thailand very well here, because many of the doctors have advised the government not to ease the lockdown measures yet, because if we ease the lockdown too early, there is a high chance of resurgence or more and more infections that might occur if we ease the lockdown too early. So just because the number of infections are decreasing every day, it doesn't mean that it's time to celebrate. It's time to actually rethink about how we should move on with the crisis.
Absolutely.
Of course, we all have to take cautious measure, and that's what we have been told by the government, that we all have to be quite cautious and keep our guard quite high in order to fight the coronavirus.